Hi, I'm Yael Averbuch West, and you're listening to...
Oh, no. Hello and welcome to Expected Own Goals, Rainy Morning Edition. I'm your host, Eric Morgan.
And I am Evan Davis, part 2 of our series from San Jose for NWSL Championship Week. We are talking today with the general manager of Gotham FC, Yael Averbuch West. Welcome to the show, Yael.
Thank you. Excited for the conversation.
Let's start with sort of the unique place that you find yourself in. I mean, as of 3 days ago, there were 3 ex-players who were running front offices in the league. Now we're down to 2 based on Haley Carter leaving Orlando. But you're also unique in that group because you spent so much time not only as a player, but also representing players, working with the NWSL Players Association in an executive capacity. I'd like to hear from you what that experience has done to shape how you do this job, which, you know, not everybody moves from labor to management and manages to keep their soul, but I get the impression you've done a good job of it. So what about...
Assuming you have a soul.
Yeah.
Made a large assumption there.
Yeah. So what was your time working with the union able to give you in terms of perspective on how to then become a general manager and run things from that side?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, the thing I've realized again and again and kind of relearned is that it's always more complex than it might seem. So I think that was one thing, you know, as a player, you think like, well, why can't this just be better? Well, like, what does that actually mean? What things need to be better? And as an active player, when we were starting to form the Players Association and I was starting to have conversations with the league, I very quickly understood that it's not always that simple. Like there's a lot that goes into all of this, like running a league, running a team. And so I learned a ton through that experience. And, you know, I have used a lot of that as I've transitioned into my role as general manager, but I am still learning all the time. I'm learning about what it means to, what it means for our owners, what it means to lead in this capacity. And it's always very complex. And the complexity of decision making is something that I think of all the time now, is there's usually not a black and white, right and wrong. It's somewhere in between. And it's about navigating, understanding the interests of all the relevant stakeholders and trying to come to the right solution for everybody. But I say this to players, I say this on recruiting calls, I say this all the time. Like, I always introduce myself as a player first and foremost. Like, that's the essence of my identity. And that's what I know from an emotional standpoint. That's what I've experienced for most of my career. But I've added a lot of layers to my understanding, and I continue to add them now through these other roles.
You found that your experience as a player has allowed you to relate to other players that you now oversee from a management position.
We should ask them that. I think so. But, you know, the conversation I have with players quite often is, I'm going to share a perspective that if I was you, when I was playing, and if I was you, I couldn't have accepted. And I think there's a lot of that, is that sometimes the perspective I have now, I know is impossible for a player to fully understand. And I 100% know that when I was playing actively, someone could have said that to me and I either wouldn't have cared or wouldn't have understood. And so I think there's always, you know, the mindset of a player is so focused and so kind of single-minded in the approach of what needs to be done. And that's part of what makes our athletes extraordinary and world-class. And I don't think until you're finished with that journey, you can see it in a different way. So even my perspective now, having put that part of my journey aside and seeing it from a different perspective, I know that when I'm speaking to the players at times, they're not able yet to see that perspective. And I acknowledge that to them. So, and I wish that I was, you know, able as a player to understand more. I think it would have been I would have actually, I don't know if I would have been a better player. I would have enjoyed my playing experience more if I could have seen it from a different perspective. But I also realize how difficult that is to do.
You are unique also in that we're over 4 years into your tenure here as a general manager, if we fold in your interim period as well. GMs don't always last that long. And it's not just in this league. Like, the shelf life of that position can often be very short. Can you share, now that we've got 2025, but one game behind us, what are you like now as a general manager that maybe would have surprised you when you were first tapped to be interim back in 2021?
Well, first I will say I didn't fully understand the job when I took the role, and that's something I'm pretty open about. I played in a league where the general manager role is very different than
Yeah.
what it is now. So not only has our club at Gotham evolved and the league has evolved, but the nature of the general manager role has evolved itself. And so I personally have evolved within those other evolving kind of ecosystems. And also just, the look and feel for who a general manager might be has even changed and evolved. Like the people I was speaking to who are my counterparts when I took the job was a very different group. But I think that, if I were to self-reflect, I've tried really hard from the beginning of my time to approach things and kind of my promise to myself is I'm always going to be honest with the players. I'm always going to be as transparent as I can be. And what I've added to that is an understanding that my role is to do what is best for the club. And to do that in a way where I can also try to be honest with the players and try to be transparent is really challenging. Transparency isn't always possible, like for good reason. And that's something I've learned about managing the business of the soccer side of our club. And so for me, navigating that balance and trying to be have a player-centric approach and be a player-friendly voice, and I'd say even like heart, like the heart of what I do for the club from my position is focused on doing it for the players. But that doesn't always look like that in a direct way. And because my role is to make decisions that are best for the club. And at times I've grown a lot in terms of my ability to identify and make really difficult decisions that feel uncomfortable, but I only do those things when I am sure it's the right thing for the club. And so I do think I've evolved in terms of my understanding of how to make really difficult decisions and when those decisions are necessary. And it doesn't get any easier to do, but definitely I felt some moments along the way where I had moments of separation from the player group where I had to make a difficult decision that maybe a player or certain players in the group weren't happy with. And I knew it was still the right decision to do for the club and for the overall success of the organization. So those moments, I do think I've gotten better at identifying those moments and more comfortable with those moments, but they're really difficult, and I don't think they'll ever feel easy or nice.
You inherited the club in, let's say, an unstable place, and now I think Gotham is a paragon of stability at this point. What has that journey been like? What did you feel like needed fixing immediately, and what have sort of changed over the years that you've sort of smoothed and massaged?
Well, I've realized that it's a lot easier to take something that everyone acknowledges isn't where you want it to be and make it somewhat good than it is to take something that's somewhat good and make it great and sustain that. So we've now entered kind of part 2 of that journey, which is, how do we sustain success? How do we build and optimize and become world-class from where we are now? And how do we do that, not just for 1 year, not for 2 years, but how do we set the club up for a long-term success? But yeah, initially it's very easy to, with the kind of things that were going on initially, we needed an industrial washer dryer for the equipment team to do, they were doing like 40 loads of laundry. We didn't have a place for the coaches to meet privately with the players. So, asking for direct feedback and hard conversations, there was literally not a space to do that. So we're talking about very low-hanging fruit, honestly, but someone had to come in and prioritize, and prioritizing those things is really challenging. And then understanding from the players what I knew to be true, but I got, confirmation of, which is that in looking at the priorities, because a lot of clubs in NWSL were at this point too, Gotham was at the bottom of the table, but you could have gone to any club mostly at that time and made a really long list of all the things that needed improvement. But what do you do first, and what do you put most of your energy and time and investment into? And this was feedback I got, but I think it just resonated with me so much. Is the most important thing was the experience the players have every day on the field. Are we as a club showing them the respect of having a leader and a coaching staff surrounding a head coach who are teaching, are pushing the players, are holding accountability and high standards, and have a level of tactical understanding and nuance that helps to push the players into where they're really an expert in that area. And so that started off as our priority and always is our priority. And then kind of everything else you got to build around that.
You are also, there's so many unique things about you, Yael, but like the relationship that a GM can have with a head coach now for 3 straight years is also kind of rare in professional sports because those jobs are so malleable. But you and Juan Carlos Amaros have now been able to work together for 3 seasons running. Can you talk to us about what that relationship has been like, and also how that has changed from the moment you decided he was the right fit for the job to where you guys are now. And there's been a lot of mostly ups, but there have been some downs in those 3 years. So take us through that relationship and how you've developed it.
Yeah, to your point, I think that the way to do any of these things over time has to be through evolution, like personal evolution. I have to evolve. Juan has to evolve. We have to evolve in our working relationship because everything around us is evolving. So when Juan came into Gotham, he was already in the league at Houston. The league was at a really different place than it was 1 year ago, and it is this year. And the expectations of kind of the tactical understanding of teams was different. The style of play in the league generally was different. So my initial relationship with Juan was that we wanted to kind of redefine what winning soccer can look like in NWSL and to create a true team identity. And that was one piece of the project. And from there, in 2023, obviously we had success that was beyond probably what we could have planned in winning the championship. But we both knew that, we were a sixth place team, and I think that was accurate to where we were. So we have had to evolve through a lot of roster change that has been intentional to both increase competition on the roster and increase the level of our roster, but also make sure we have the right cultural fit of players who not just are right for each other, but who are the right fit for our club. And yeah, both of us, I think, need to continue to evolve in the way we work together, the way we make decisions. We debate things. We don't always agree, that's for sure. We both have very strong opinions and strong personalities. And I think us ever getting too comfortable and thinking that we have it figured out will be when it goes wrong. So, every few months almost, and definitely every off season, we're having a really serious conversation about, okay, here's how it went, but what do we need to do moving forward? How do we reinvent ourselves? How do we reinvent how we're doing things at Gotham to not just stay at the top, but kind of lead the way and have other teams adjusting to us?
That reinvention, what did you think after losing the semifinal last year and entering the offseason? What did you think that reinvention was going to require as you made plans for the January window and for preseason? And as you moved through the wintertime and you got closer to the opening bell, and then as the season began, how did that concept of reinvention shift when, the cold light of reality began to shine on some of your plans?
So it's interesting. We really, and I realize this now over the last few years, as of the middle of the year, I usually kind of know where we need to go. Just in a lot of ways and how we need to progress as an organization. It's really hard to do that in the middle of the season. So we need to wait till the off season to do some of that. But it's not, and I feel very strongly about this, the final outcome of the season for us. So whether we won that semifinal or lost it, or this year, whether we win the championship or we had lost to Kansas City in the first round, the plan usually needs to remain the same. Like it can't be left up to, it can't be masked by success. If we happen to win the championship, we still need to make the same improvements. And then last year, similarly, just because we lost that game doesn't mean we take another route at what we need to do. Last year we realized that we brought in a group of players to an existing team that had won the championship. And we as a club were not prepared to properly smooth that, create a transition and integration. So it was a really tough year. It was a tough year behind the scenes. Our team performed extremely well on the field, but we didn't feel that the way that we were operating behind the scenes was sustainable. So we knew that we had to make some changes. And we knew that, had we won the championship last year, we still knew that. It wouldn't have changed things. So that feels really important to me. Is usually I've kind of identified somewhat of the plan by about midway through the year. And then it's about understanding, refining, continuing to learn about the group and kind of slowly starting to enact that through the off season. But what we are trying to do now is stabilize some of that, because to show up at preseason and need to all of a sudden learn the identity of your team is really challenging. In an ideal world, we would kind of know our identity more than we knew this preseason and have smaller tweaks. So we're in a period of time where we would like to, as much as possible, stabilize we've made pretty extreme roster changes, staffing changes, behind the scenes over the last few years. And all of them, I think, have gotten us to a new and evolved place that we're happy with where we're going, but we still have a lot of work to do. But yeah, we need to now kind of slow that a bit and try to stabilize with the pieces we know we want to move forward with.
You had a real roster overhaul. You were talking about team identity. What defines a Gotham player? What strikes you as, oh, this person is a Gotham player. I want this person either here or I want to retain this person?
Yeah, there are several key components of that I've started to get clarity on, and I know now at recruiting players. First and foremost, all of our players have to want to get better. Yes, we want them to come and help the team win, but if they're not hungry, if they don't want to receive feedback, it usually doesn't work very well. So the players who thrive at Gotham are ready to receive feedback, be pushed, be put in uncomfortable situations, be played in a role that they're not used to, and really thrive there and kind of own that opportunity. So that's a really important part of the mindset. I think the other thing is we have a desire for players to really feel that the club success is the most important thing. That's challenging. And I'll say, honestly, as a player, I don't know if I ever got there as a professional, because the club experience is transient. You're moving around. You have your own ambitions as a player. And for us, I recognize that. I don't ever expect players are going to not care about their individual personal careers. That is everything to them. That's what they've invested their whole lives in. So we want to show respect to that. But at the same time, players, it's very important to us. And when it doesn't go right for a player individually, the way they react and the way they show up for the team, because I think in those cases, when it's done really well, and we have some players, I'd say, Bernina to me is like the best example of this. She shows up every day in the same way. She's positive. She works hard. You cannot tell if you watch her every day. You couldn't tell if she started and played the whole game, if she came on as a sub, if she didn't play 1 minute, same thing. That's really important for us. And the players who are able to do that really do succeed at Gotham. And then I'd say the last thing is, players who are willing to compete. In an ideal world, we want to have 2 world-class players deep in every role, and at least sometimes more, and different looks at different types of profiles of players who could do well against different competition. And if the players who do well thrive in that kind of environment, they like that. They want that type of competition. They don't want to start just because there's no one else. So those are kind of, I think, 3 key components. And I could tell when I ask a player on a recruiting call, what are your priorities as a player? I can usually start to tell. And then when I see, we'll present to them and our coaches will talk to them about how they see them fitting into the team, and also how we as a club are going to help them get better. And the players who don't like that meeting because they're receiving feedback on some of their weaknesses, like, we just know. And the players who thrive and they're asking questions, and they want more information, or they're nodding, it's usually a great fit.
So Jalen Howell, Sarah Shapansky, Gabby Pugdilio, Lily Rail, and of course the big capper in the summertime, Jaden Shaw. These are 5 players who have now become pretty critical to the Gotham starting 11, or game changers off the bench. With everything that you've just said about what makes a Gotham player and what you would want the identity of Gotham players to be, take us through some of those acquisitions that I just rattled off and how they can exemplify some of the things that you and Juan are hoping to look for.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you say that group of players, but all of them are so unique and different in their approach, their kind of the phase of their career they're in. So I'll take a couple from there. Jalen, her performance this year is maybe one of my favorite just storylines watching in NWSL.
Ours too. Yeah, we love it.
I think she's always had the tools. I remember watching her in college and thinking, she's on track to be a national team player. But the reality of the league, it's really hard, and you have to have the right fit. You have to have the team that's going to bring out the best in you. And her mindset, she's textbook mindset for Gotham. She's ready to work. She's ready to grind. She'll do anything and everything the team needs of her. And I love seeing that succeed, because, it's very easy to not notice Jalen's work when you watch the game. But if you watch and you see the moments where she tracks back and the ball never even goes there just because she's done the work, there's so many of them. And I love it so much. I feel so happy for her, seeing her get back into the national team. That to me is one of the greatest storylines. But yeah, she's not a new pro. She's now played for 2 other professional teams. She knows what works for her, what doesn't work for her. She can tell us that. We can tell her what we think she needs. And that's always a great fit. We want the players who have an idea of what they think they need also to make it to the next level. And then, I'll take Sarah Shapansky, a new professional. She brings a notebook to every meeting, which I love. But she is genuinely incredibly grateful for the opportunity in a way that no one needs to be. She earned it. She's a top player. She's started games in the league. But she recognizes every moment as an opportunity, and she is learning. She is growing. I think we've just seen the start of her trajectory because of the way she approaches where she is. There could be players who get the opportunity she's gotten and are like, I've made it. No way. It's almost made her more hungry, which I think is unbelievable. And then, I could go through every player in the list, but I have to talk about Jaden.
We're here for that
Yeah, no,
conversation, by the way.
Yeah. Jaden, when we first talked to Jaden and we said, we want you to come to Gotham, we're ready to do whatever it takes. She was very loyal to her club. She said, I don't want to just, jump ship because things are hard. I need to really understand this move. And I have so much respect for that. Honestly, that's the type of player I want at our club. And we went through a really intensive process to prove to Jaden that we could help her be the player we know she could be. I mean, you talk about having the talent. She has every single thing you need. But how do you allow a player like that both the freedom and the guidance to push them on the things that need to be better, but give them the freedom to feel confident? And I'm really proud of our coaching staff. They put in a ton of time. We didn't know if she was going to want to join our club. We didn't know if we could get a deal done. And they made individual plans. They watched film. They broke it down. They started to coach her before she was here. And I'm really honored that she took this leap of faith in us. This is such a crucial part of her career. There's nothing more sacred that a player could entrust us with than a phase of their career that they can never get back. And so our coaches show a lot of respect to that. And it means a lot to me that they are doing the work behind the scenes. Even Juan sent a little text message to me and our ownership after last game. And it's a text message from Anton Blackwood, who's our head of individual development, asking Jaden if she wants to stay again because they had again to work on free kicks.
Worked out.
There's not many more special things like in the world than doing the hard work that maybe no one will ever see and then it paying off on the big stage. And so, yeah, like almost have the chills talking about this, but she's such a special person. She's brought such a great energy to our group, and we've asked for her trust, and we owe her so much in terms of helping her get and stay at the highest level. So, yeah, I have so many stories. I could talk so long about our players. They're the most. I get so much joy watching our players succeed.
So if 2023 was defined by, wow, how did we get here? And 2024 was sort of like hitting like the 50th percentile on what like a good team that does well and doesn't win it. This year, you were a very good team that ended up in the 8th seed. How do you deal with this sort of managing of expectations, knowing that all the planning that you've done has actually built one of the better teams in the league, and yet the performances aren't aligned there?
Or at the very least, the results aren't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's the complex thing is how do you evaluate performance versus results versus all these things? Because sometimes they align in soccer. And as we know, also since soccer is a cruel sport where sometimes they don't. Yeah, I think, we've had a lot of change and we have a lot of new players in our team. You named some of them. There are even more.
Oh, yeah.
And so for us, I think when we're good this season, we're lights out good. Like our best self is incredible. But we haven't been as consistent as we need to be. And so I think, we have scrapped and clawed to earn this opportunity to be in the championship. I'm very proud of the group. And moving forward, we need to look to be consistent as our best selves and to continue to evolve our group. And that's one of the most interesting things in watching kind of the evolution of our team over the 3 seasons, as you pointed out, is that we have a unique identity this year. We have unique strengths and weaknesses, and it has taken us a little bit into the season, I think, to fully understand those and to play to our strengths properly and to try to, find solutions and mitigate our weaknesses as a team, as every team is doing. And one of the most exciting puzzles is to try to do that and to try to peak at the right time in the season. Not all games in the season are created equal. We have the opportunity to be in one that's more important than any of the ones we maybe didn't perform well or lost along the way. And but certainly, our goal is to be top 4 perennial in the league. So we failed at that goal this year, and I like to set ambitious goals. I'm okay to fail at them. I think you can't win unless you're okay to lose along the way. You can't succeed unless you're okay to not succeed sometimes. So we're comfortable with that. We're comfortable to state a big ambition, know that sometimes we don't hit the mark. I believe that if we do that, if we're bold and we put our neck out there that we will succeed more times than not. But yeah, we didn't succeed in our initial goal this season. So now we got to make up for it tomorrow. Or not tomorrow, Saturday. I don't even know what day it is.
So I think it's fair to say you finished top 2 at least.
Yes, thank you.
We're a tactics and data and analytics based show, and you've talked a lot about the things that identify a Gotham player from sort of the mentality, the character lens, but there's also the video and in-person scouting lens, and there's the are they a right fit for Juan's system, tactical lens, and then there's the what is the data telling us about what this player might be that their results aren't necessarily showing you in the short term, and you got to weight all of those things and throw it all into the soup. So in terms of how you have decided to organize the front office and think about using all of those tools to evaluate and go after a player, how do you integrate, maybe weight or incorporate all of them to give you the holistic view that you ultimately are seeking?
That's a big question. Yeah, that's the art. The art of it is like the science is each of those things individually.
Mm-hmm.
We have an amazing scouting team. They've been with us since before Juan was with us, and all of our good acquisitions, I really owe a lot to that group. I trust them immensely in early stages, but I think we use data in a really smart way. It's important to me that data is implemented in a way that is taken into account in that mix in the way that's true to how we want to be and how we see the game. And then, there's all these, there's Juan and our coach's opinion, there's the club opinion, there's all these pieces of the puzzle. I think it also depends, something that I'm really big on is also depends on the moment in the season. And there is an aspect of momentum and in decision making and types of decisions at different moments. So when you look at Jaden, I never look at anything in a vacuum. Like we were at a point in the season where I felt like our group really needed the injection of a big move and a big time gamer, someone who was going to want those big moments. And so the player we searched for in that moment was a little different than just any top player. And, when we look at our players' versatility is really important and their game understanding. And sometimes those things are not easy to measure. Or, we're looking at, how do we measure what we can measure and how do we use the art and the eye test and in our networks to understand the things that we can't measure and fitting that all together. I love that part of the job. It's something I didn't think about when I first took the job. You think of a roster, okay, you got 26 spots. How do you just fill out the spots? But there's a mood to it. The team has an identity as a group, and you take one part out, you add one part in, you get an injury. Tierna's injury for us this year was really like, do we just replace Tierna and try to find it? She's irreplaceable. You can't find
Can you replace Tierna?
Well, exactly. You can't find a center back in the world who is gonna do that. So then do we just work around it? And like how do other players step up and all that? It's like a living, breathing thing, the team as an entity. And so all of the decisions and all of the things you mentioned have to fit into that also. And sometimes it's a bit of you don't know what's going to have what effect at times. You could removing someone from the environment or adding somebody can have equivalent effects at times. And so it really is an art, and it's something we talk about. This is our conversation behind the scenes, basically all day and night.
There is the relationship you have with Juan. There's the relationship you have with the players. There's also the relationship that you have with ownership, and Gotham's ownership group is kind of interesting, is kind of unique, and you've moved through a couple of different controlling owners, the person who you're going to directly interface with. Can you say a little bit about how your relationship with Carolyn Tisch-Blodgett over these last couple of years began, evolved, changed, what latitudes she's able to give you in the job that you do? Bringing up Jaden is kind of interesting because obviously it's a big cash outlay, so ownership's going to have to be involved in that conversation. So what has that dynamic been, and how has that shaped and reshaped over the last couple of years?
Carolyn joined us at such an interesting time because it was right before we ended up winning the championship. And so coming from American football, which obviously works differently than soccer, one of the initial conversations that we had with her, I tried to explain to her, like, this isn't indicative of really where we are as a team. We still need to do a lot of things. And like kind of what I was saying before is like we could win a game and not perform well, or we could be performing really well and not winning games. So I want to be able to speak to you about how we're doing that may not make sense in terms of the results at times. And, I have a ton of respect for how Carolyn leads. She asks a lot of questions. She wants to learn about the sport. We joke that she's now like immersed herself in learning about soccer. So I sometimes give her a feedback on her soccer knowledge. But at the end of the day, I have a lot of autonomy and a lot of trust from our ownership and from Carolyn. And I don't take that lightly. I lead in a way where I have very strong opinions about how I believe the club should move, what I believe our soccer identity should be, and how our soccer identity should shape everything else we do as a club. And I have a forum where I can speak honestly about that and go out on a limb and say, hey, I think we should pay a lot of money for this, or I don't think we should pay a lot of money for this. And I'm not always right, but I do have a lot of respect from her, and I appreciate that. And I try to show that back and try to make sure that everything we're doing with the investment that she and her family have made in the club, that we show respect to that investment and make it something that the tri-state area can feel really proud of. So it's an unbelievable opportunity with Carolyn coming on board. Like, I just, even learning from her and seeing how the Giants operate, seeing like what it could look like and what her vision for the club is, it's bigger than I ever could have imagined. As a player, we've gone so far beyond what I imagined top notch was. And for me, that's pretty cool because, when we're talking about where we want to be, I often say, I don't think I should be the one to set the vision because I don't even think I can think big enough. Like, I can think from a soccer perspective, but I am limited by my own experience in women's soccer as to what I think the game can be. And so I've learned, and my eyes have been open to what the opportunity can be. And with Carolyn's arrival comes that opportunity.
You were talking about sort of the balancing of the many sciences and creating art out of it. What has been the steepest part of the learning curve? What part of the science have you needed the most work in? And then what part came most intuitively to you in this job?
Managing club decisions versus what coaches want was really eye-opening to me. We came from a model when I became general manager, the head coach was essentially the GM, the sporting director, the technical director, all the things. Yeah. And then the general manager was the administrator who carried out the paperwork. And that's no disrespect to anyone who was in the role. It just, that was how it worked. Yeah.
And not uncommon in other parts of the world at that, other times. So
exactly. And so managing, of course, I want Juan to have the team on the field and on the bench and in the stands who he thinks give him the best chance to win. But managing that in a salary cap league and with the roster rules means that we do need to make decisions. Like, I own the decision-making process, and at times I need to move a player off the roster and Juan doesn't agree, or we need to bring a player and he's pushing for one player and I think we should bring someone else, and we have to have that debate. And that's been very challenging to manage, and it's something we talk about with each other. We talk about how aligned are we? Can we be more aligned? When do we not want to be aligned? And we want to debate, and that's how we make the best decision for the club. And so, yeah, that's been tough. I think that's something I didn't think about in taking the job. Managing that balance wasn't something that was talked about in the league or really being done. And I've had a lot of growth in terms of my ability to synthesize all of the various inputs. And, how much am I willing to have my personal opinion and my eye test be challenged by data or by someone else's opinion? And I try to be very open-minded on that. But also, I'm a human being and I have opinions and I have strong opinions, and those do matter. As a leader, I don't ever want to discount my own opinions and my gut. And I think one thing I haven't changed is that I do follow my gut. All the data and everything can be saying one thing. If I just don't feel in my gut it's the right thing for the team, I can't do it. And so, but my gut opinion has changed based on adjusting information. So, but yeah, I think I'd say I'm very, I do, at the end of the day, when there's a lot of differing pieces of information, I do believe that I am in a role to make decisions and I have to trust my gut at times.
So your gut is constantly learning as well.
My gut is learning a lot, and it's kind of a funny analogy because of my health problems I've had. I literally, half of my gut has been removed, so I don't know if that's a good thing or bad.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll leave that to the philosophers to decide. Yeah. So again, a lot of conversations today about team identity and relationships and how those have changed. You mentioned earlier when you brought Juan in that the two of you did agree that you wanted to change the concept of like what a team could do to win in the NWSL. 2023, we heard the phrase organized chaos a lot. Obviously, you guys have had a lot of success since then. And maybe this goes to what is more intuitive for you being an ex-player. Like, tactically, what did that mean for you guys. What did you think was sort of the conventional wisdom in the NWSL at the end of 2022 about what it took to win? And then what were you and Juan trying to inject to shake that up? And then 3 years later, has that changed for the two of you? And has that changed maybe for the league more broadly?
Yeah, you just asked a question I could spend an hour saying.
Sorry.
I'll try to summarize. I think in my experience playing in the league and right after, when I came into being a GM, it was very kind of black and white. There were some teams that were trying to play possession style. And usually what happened is you would train like that and you get in the game and people get nervous and you go to what was effective. And what was effective in the league is individual players who win their individual duels in a transitional style where your team could impose themselves through that. And it was very direct. Even if you're trying to play possession, you either would lose or you have to change your style. And I saw that for years and years. I'd train one way and we'd get in the game and it's like, this doesn't work. I think that what Juan's system and style introduces is nuance and not always being black and white. There is an effective nature to playing high up on the field and limiting another team's chances and pressing high on the field, but also, the idea of organized chaos or having both structure and fluidity to what you do is that both things can be true at once. There is some structure needed to properly execute well tactically in a soccer game, but also if we're recruiting players who are brilliant and smart footballers, they should be able to create what they see on the field, and there's no timeouts. You can't coach all that stuff. So including both of those and having an aspect of decision-making within a framework, I think is really important. And that's what made us so hard to play against initially, is that teams kind of knew our identity, but didn't know how to defend us because it wasn't mapped. There wasn't a tactical plan to some of the attack. There were concepts that our team would enact, but they were in charge and they were thinking and seeing and reacting. Moving forward, I do think the league has caught up in some ways to that. There are other teams playing what I would consider a fairly nuanced style of managing the ball as a way to win the game and not always playing direct. What's been really interesting about the league is I actually think over the last 3 years, we've evolved to a point where at times the attacking in the league is actually better than defending. And that's been a real transition point because in my whole time playing, the defending in the league was better. It's easier to destroy than to create. The defending was always better. And I think now there are attacking teams and there are moments of play in the league where the attack is so good that the defenders can't, there's no way to defend it. It's just you had to be like, oh, that was nice. And that's when football becomes beautiful because those are the highlight reel type moments. We need to continue to evolve. Other teams have started to do things somewhat similar to how we have in terms of movement, interchange, and kind of a free-flowing attack, but with maintaining solid defensive structure. And so we are always looking at how do we take that to the next level? What's the next trend within the game, and how do we make what we're doing even that much better?
So there has been a lot of conversation recently around how the payroll and salary cap structure works in this league. And obviously it underwent a lot of changes when the new CBA got signed a year and a half ago, but we might be at another inflection point with all of that. You've been a player, you're now a GM, you've interfaced with ownership, you've interfaced with coaches. Where do you think the league now needs to go when there's a lot of external pressure to say, this league might not be equipped at the moment to retain its top talent, given the financial restrictions that are in place?
This is actually a great example of a situation that I've realized the complexity behind it, in my role and from my vantage point. Whereas from a player perspective, I don't know if I could have appreciated. When I was playing, this was not a conversation. We all knew we wanted the league to be sustainable. We weren't making any money. It was just a different time. Now, there's a lot of complexity. I do think the salary cap model, is why on decision day there is so much excitement and why there's this group of teams in the league who are always, you never know what's going to happen. And I think that's a selling point for our league. We tell players, you come to NWSL, every game's like a Champions League semifinal, basically. It's that level of intensity. So there is an aspect of the salary cap that is really kind of part of our identity as a league. At the same time, what it can't account for is the market and where the ecosystem as a whole is going, where women's soccer is going and how it's evolving. So I think at this point in time, we need to have a flexibility in our structure and to look at where's the world game going. We don't need to, as a league, compete to spend the most of any team out there, but we have to be able to be competitive within a certain range of what is mostly in Europe right now. And so I know, it's going to require some creativity to figure out how do we do that? How do we not have to have this conversation every 2 years as the league continues to evolve? And kind of what's the right next step to make sure that we're competitive in terms of retaining talent, attracting talent, and competing in what is a worldwide ecosystem. So it is a very complicated conversation to do that right. And to, the simple thing would be, well, why don't we follow MLS rules? Well, MLS is a certain position in the world of football. And if NWSL is trying to be, kind of break into what is in the men's game, a very European centric, it's the teams in Europe, and then there's some on the outside. NWSL has kind of disrupted that model in the women's game. It's some in Europe and NWSL. And so how do we compete to be the best league in the world? And I think it requires a different look at things than what MLS has done. And it does, but at the same time, I don't think we should just wipe it away and say no salary cap. So it's how do we figure out that balance?
Yeah, we talk about this all the time on the pod that the NWSL sort of is home to 14 of the 20 or 25 richest clubs in the world as the game goes. And that there are, I think as Olivia Moultrie put it, no freebies in this league. Do you feel like Gotham is well positioned to operate potentially if the salary cap opens itself up? Or is it something that you feel like you might already have competitive advantage given how you evaluate if the cap remains exactly as it is? How do you feel Gotham is positioned in this uncertain time?
Yeah, we've worked very hard to position ourselves well regardless, but certainly the more, in coming into this, I came into this job before free agency when the salary cap was still very low. It was a different world. Kind of the ethos of how we have built is that we want to be a destination for players who fit the mold of the kind of the things we talked about before. So I believe that any amount of money we're able to spend towards bringing players, we can recruit the most exciting players in the world who fit that mold. And we've had really exciting conversations with players from big clubs, and we either can or can't fit them in our salary cap. So, we're prepared as is. We have to manage to the cap the way it is now. We have to create the best possible roster. And that's kind of the fun and the puzzle of my job. At the same time, should that be opened up, which I do believe there should be a movement on that. That's my personal opinion. It would be very exciting for us to be able to recruit and have more flexibility on that. I think it's one of our strengths as a club. And I do think people see what we're building and players see it and they would be excited to join. So we're always operate in a way where we hope that we can attract the best of the best out there.
The other side of the senior team is also the pressing need for creating a developmental pipeline for the league. We saw some teams begin to use the USL Super League sort of as a place to loan players and get them professional game minutes. A lot of teams still aren't quite ready to make the jump to developing academies and second teams. How do you feel like Gotham is positioned in that particular equation, and what might be your and Carolyn and Juan's goals in trying to create a development pipeline that doesn't force you to say no to probably more than 26 players you wish were, under the Gotham aegis?
It's a very important part of our conversations and our strategic outlook at what we're doing. Some clubs, people are approaching it different ways, as you said. And some clubs have a youth club attached, and you could, build that into a pipeline. We're independent. We're independent of a men's club, or we're independent of any youth structure currently. So we have taken early stages at our professional player pathway and how we're looking to shape that. We need more players in our mix than the 26 players who can be on our first team. We scout beyond that group. We are working in our region to develop beyond that group. And so we are working to create our pathway and how that looks. I think the question with this is just, and this is true for all the clubs, is how do you prioritize this against other things? It's incredibly important. It's becoming more important as the depth of talent in the women's game grows, and as the competition calendar grows too. So it's a huge area of emphasis for us, and a big part of our strategy. And we're having this conversation now. We're looking at next year's plan and beyond, and what steps do we take next year, and how does that evolve? It's very central to what we're talking about.
The loss of the draft, you probably weren't going to get Lily Reel if you'd had your normal draft allocation slot. How do you feel like that level of openness is changing the NWSL? How does that, as a GM who is good at identifying college talent, how do you feel the college game may benefit or suffer from this sort of new time that we are in? And do you care?
You're throwing a real crazy one at the end. The college game is changing in ways that I can't even begin to understand. It's so different than when I came up through the system. So even with or without the draft, it's already different. I think the fact that players can move freely within that world, it creates a different mindset. When I knew I was selecting college, I knew I was going to be there for 4 years, and exactly 4 years. And so now that there's all these other considerations, do players play in college? Do they go and leave after 1 year? Do they go and move to another school and then leave? And so it's really this. It's a whole new world. I think we need time to really answer, how does this impact? I know for Gotham, this is really exciting for us. The more free agency and the more freedom players have to choose, we believe that we can create something that players want to join, and we can pitch them on joining us if they're the right fit. So we love it. I do actually. I miss draft day because it was fun, but we love it. We love going after, the first round picks and seeing how many of them we get. It's a huge opportunity for clubs. But I think we need time to be able to tell how it affects the college game. It's presented. I'm sure it's challenging for the college coaches to navigate. I can't imagine how that feels. They not only can lose players to other schools, but if you do a good job as a college coach, you could lose your player before 4 years. And how do you plan your roster? I don't even know how they're navigating that. So I do think, I think we need some time to let it play out to see kind of how it changes. I also do think that there has been, there's been a wave of players signing U18 contracts or leaving college early. And it's been the new thing to do. There's a new opportunity. Everyone's really excited about it. I do think there will be a rebalancing of players understanding and evaluating a little bit more clearly if it's the right thing to do, and kind of the trade-offs of you could play professionally and wait 2 more years, and that's still your trajectory. And is it the right time for you? Rather than, well, other people are doing it. Am I missing an opportunity? So I think everyone, including the players, is going to try to figure out, what's best, and it'll normalize at some point. But right now, we're not even close.
Second championship game in 3 years. You've been here before. You know what it's like. How do you sense you and the rest of the group are handling the build-up to Saturday relative to how you guys did with the whole experience in San Diego back in 2023?
It's hard. I already can't even remember. It's like so
I was there. I can't really remember
either. We have practiced winners in our group. We have players who've won World Cups. We have really experienced leaders who take care of the team and share their wisdom and are talking to the younger players. For us, the more we can make it business as usual, the better. We prepare for every game like it's this game. And so we're trying as much as possible to insulate the team from, we have the fun stuff. We have the awards event, we have the, media day, and that's part of the fun. We want them to enjoy their time and try to enjoy this week in the lead up to the game, but also as much as we can prepare like it's any other game and stay focused, the better. But I trust that Juan has proved that he can lead the staff and the players in these big moments very effectively. And our players have done it before. They've been there, they've won things, they know what it takes. So I'm very hands-off during this week. I'm here to support as needed. They know what to do. They're doing their thing. And really, they're focusing on the soccer, like none of the other stuff.
Thank you so much, Yael Averbuch West.
Thank you so
much. Really
much.
appreciate the time.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.